Oh, do you like the fact that I'm Mission Impossible-ing here?
Welcome to the FilmFile. Yes, the FilmFile. The FilmFile is a show, as I said at the top end, for film geeks by film geeks. I'm Lee Ford.
And I'm Andy Meakin.
And this show is all about, well, films. I guess it says so in the title. We'll be talking about the latest film news, reviews, views, taking deep dives into classic movies. This is certainly the film show by film geeks. And hopefully you're a film geek. Okay, with the cinemas shut, we can't bring you any current reviews. What we can bring you, though, is a deep dive into classic films or films that we think deserve more attention. And this week, we are going to give you a deep dive, if you choose to accept it, into the Mission Impossible series. So as soon as we said Mission Impossible, of course, you started to sing the legendary Lalo Schifrin theme. So the Mission Impossible series started, of course, as a TV series that ran through the 60s that starred Peter Graves in the role of Jim Phelps. And it was based around the idea of the Impossible Mission Force, IMF, that they would go on weekly missions to usually some Eastern European Soviet-style country and rescue somebody or dupe somebody into giving information. And they did so with a series of gadgets, a series of masks, a series of impersonations, and it was a hugely successful series. So for a long time, of course, there was talk of a big screen follow-up. Several scripts were produced that never got to see the light of day, and along comes Tom Cruise. So beginning in 1996, the film, taking place 6 years after the end of the previous TV sequel series, follows the mission of IMF's main field team under the leadership of Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise, to stop enemy forces while preventing an impending global disaster. The film focused on Hunt as the lead character as opposed to the ensemble cast that the series had, although in later films, Luther, played by Ving Rhames, and Benji, played by Simon Pegg, had reoccurring roles in those films. The first movie was directed by Brian De Palma and initially set the style for each film having a big name director connected to it. Of course, that changed later on. But initially, we're going to talk about Mission Impossible, the first film, as I said, directed by Brian De Palma and brought Tom Cruise into his now longest running franchise. Do you want to pick up on the first movie then?
Yep.
It came out in 1996.
So I've had the pleasure of, revisiting all of the Mission Impossible films over the past week and a half, and revisiting the first film is always a joy. This has always been the one that I considered my favourite, even though that has now changed, which we'll talk about later. But this first film, what I thought it did really clever was it played quite close to the original series, missions that self-destruct in 5 seconds, disguises, Jim Phelps, but then it flips it and plays it for a new audience, adding action and exciting, and smartly sets up the new lead in Ethan Hunt. Whilst the film starts off and you're going, oh, it's Jim Phelps, he's going to be like in control of things. Yeah, oh, this is classic. The whole film is all to have. And let's talk about the twist, because it isn't. If you don't know this twist by now, then clearly you haven't paid attention to any of the Mission Impossible films. But Jim Phelps turned out to be the bad guy, which was a big shock when it came out. It was such a huge shock that was the reason that Peter Graves refused to come back for the role. He had it offered to him, but he didn't. He was displeased with the switch of his character's role and turned it down. And Greg Morris, who played Barney in the original series, also hated the direction that the film was going and so refused to get involved. But for me, I loved that twist, especially because the reasoning for it taking place fitted so well for the character. The Cold War era was over. He was a relic of that era, and he wanted to bring about a new Cold War. He wanted to feel comfortable in the environment that he'd spent decades working within. It made sense. It was a villain that you kind of went, can kind of see where you're coming from, but you're still a bad guy. But the film was all about getting Tom Cruise his star vehicle. Tom Cruise, as producer and star, was heavily involved in the creativity of the film. He was even the source for the idea of the restaurant with the fish tanks moment, which is absolutely magnificent. And of course, he did his own stunts for the scene because it was shot with a stuntman, didn't quite look right. So Brian De Palma went, well, can you do it, Tom? Yeah, go on then. He also had a say in all the set pieces, and reports have it that even though it came in under budget and on time, Cruise and De Palma didn't quite see eye to eye. But the finished product, you can't tell that there was any conflict on set. It works so well. And the CIA break-in scene is still breathtakingly jaw-dropping. That moment, even though I've seen this film multiple times, that moment when I watched it again only a week and a half ago, I was still holding my breath. I was still tense. I knew what was going to happen, but I'm still completely caught in it because it's one of those great scenes that utilizes silence. There's no music over that scene. It's complete silence, deathly silence, because any noise could activate the alarm system within that room. And so we, as an audience, are thrown into that situation with that tenseness.
It's one of those
Marvelous.
scenes which is pure De Palma because it's clearly it's a reference to, as De Palma's done throughout his career, reference older films, and it's Teache. Is that how you pronounce it? I can't remember. Do you know the movie? Let me just look it up. I can never remember how to say it, and there's a sequence in that which it's taken from. Topic Keepy, I think it's called. It's a. Oh, come on. Just bear with, because it's just worth mentioning. I can't find it. It's a direct reference to this.
No,
I can't find it.
we're still recording. We're just researching.
Top Carpy, it's called.
Top Carpy.
I'll just do that whole bit again then. So, of course, as you know, Brian De Palma's huge references in all of his films, usually to Hitchcock. But he referenced that classic scene that you're talking about from a heist film called Top Carpy, which is again the villain is which again the hero is held using ropes as they break into as part of the plot, and it's absolutely fantastic. And of course, pure De Palma to take something that's existed before and do something new with it.
Yeah. The cast within that first film, it was a great ensemble cast, even when it kills off half of them within the first 10 minutes of the film. It's a great way, because Christian Slater pops up right at the start of the film, and you go, wow.
Emilio Estevez,
yeah, okay. The ensemble cast within there. For example, you've got Emilio Estevez who pops up, and at that time, Emilio Estevez was still quite a big name, running a series of different films in the lead up to it. He was like, oh well, he's in there. He's going to be you've just killed him off within the first 10 minutes.
Yeah, the same with Kristen Scott Thomas as well. She doesn't make it through. She only makes it through the first 15 minutes.
It completely throws you into this whole anything can happen in this film series. And I love that aspect because it means that you're constantly guessing throughout it. And in that first film, it weaves, it winds around. The twist you don't see coming, but when you rewatch it, you clearly see coming because it's obvious who shot the gun. that you see from Jim Phelps's point of view, because it's his own hand pointing back and shooting at himself. But you don't notice it first time round because you weren't expecting it. Great little twists. A film that the first time that you watch it, you might not pick up and might not follow the story completely, but it makes perfect sense on repeated viewings, and it all pieces together like an intricate puzzle.
It's funny you should say that, because all those things that you mentioned that you liked about it, I, as an old school Mission Impossible fan, found difficult. I always liked the notion of the team. I was disappointed that we weren't seeing Tom Cruise playing Jim Phelps. I thought that's where the film would go. So all the points that you've made in it, I found quite difficult, because as an old school Mission Impossible fan, it was a team exercise in every movie. It wasn't one person. It was Jim Phelps' Mission Impossible. Now, subsequently, where the films went, and moving on from Mission Impossible 1, and kind of ignoring Mission Impossible 2, which also it seems that the Mission Impossible team kind of ignore Mission Impossible 2, which was brought to us, strangely enough, by John Woo, who we mentioned earlier. The film starts for me with the third film, directed by J.J. Abrams. That, for me, is when it felt like we were getting Mission Impossible.
Yes, I mean, the second film, John Woo just delivered a John Woo film. He just delivered all the cliches that he does in every action film. And whilst it's got some great action set pieces, there's nothing of consequence throughout the whole film. It just tries to repeat the stunts of the previous film, but take them to the next level. That's not what you wanted. You wanted an ongoing flow. And like you say, J.J. Abrams came on board for the third film. David Fincher had declined due to scheduling and creative differences. And Joe Carnahan had quit over the tone of the film. He had a completely different tone in mind. Cruise, being in control of it all, said, no, this is where we want to go. But the start of Mission Impossible 3, what a way to kick off. A jaw-dropping opener with a menacing Philip Seymour Hoffman counting down to a kill before it flips back to the lead up to those events. And you are left after that opener going, did he kill her? What's going on? And it throws you completely into it, and you are engrossed in it. And it's character-driven. It's not action-driven, even though the action is great. It is character-driven. Ethan Hunt is given so much more character in this, and the team aspect starts to get brought into it. We get Ving Rhames back, but we also get the introduction of Simon Pegg in this film. He only has a small, what looks like a cameo to start with in this film, but he was basically getting put in there to seed him for the future story. And like you say, I mean, I loved what the first film did. I loved that it introduced the character of Ethan Hunt. I didn't need it to be a team-based one, because we needed to know this new character. But once you've got the team around him, that's when it starts to go from strength to strength. And the series went from strength to strength from this one onwards. This third film was, I'd not been back to revisit this one since it got released. So it was an absolute joy going back and revisiting it. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, he was magnificent in a role that he wasn't normally cast for. He was not the kind of actor who would get cast in this kind of role.
I totally agree. And he's because he underplays the menace becomes even more frightening. It had all the classic Mission Impossible tropes for me. It had the disguises used in a way that was effective. It had the team element, which was important for me to feel like Mission Impossible, because up until this stage, it didn't feel much of a connection with the TV series. It had a great plot. It had some great action sequence. I think Cruise came into his own on this and felt as though he now had more control over it. I know he's had control since the beginning, but the film started to go into a direction that I liked. It really, really captured the impossible style that one wanted from a series called Mission Impossible.
We've not. But this sounds like it could be right up Woo's alley. That sounds a bit rude.